International Criminal Court Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan stands accused of sexually harassing one of his employees. And yes, the story is connected to his intention of issuing arrest warrants against Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant later this week. Also, if we're talking about war crimes, Vice President Kamala Harris has accused Israel of genocide. I'll have details on that. And finally, is the United States leaking classified, that is top secret details of Israel's preparations to attack Iran's whatever? I'll have all the details and commentary on all of these stories coming up on In Focus. So later this week, a 3-judge panel at the International Criminal Court, which, by the way, Israel is not a member of, is supposed to rule on ICC Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan's determination that he wishes to issue arrest warrants against Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Initially, when he announced that this was his intention on May 20th, he also announced that he intended to issue arrest warrants against Hamas leaders, Yahya Sinwar, Ismail Haniyeh, and Mohammed Def. All of those, of course, have been eliminated in counter-terror raids against them by Israel, most recently Yahya Sinwar. But since he can't arrest any Hamas leaders, what he really wants to do is the only thing that he ever wanted to do, which is to arrest Prime Minister Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. And by the way, when we're saying that parenthetically, we should note that the international arrest warrants that he issued against the Hamas terrorists were done sort of as a way to gloss over and, of course, make moral equivalence between Israel and Hamas. Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization that committed a one-day genocide against Israel and its citizens on October 7th and is covenantally bound to the annihilation of the Jewish people, the physical annihilation of the Jewish people and of the Jewish state. This genocidal terrorist organization was basically a fig leaf, right, for going after the main culprit, which is the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the state of Israel, and accusing us of the crimes that they did commit and seek to continue to commit against Israel. So that was what Karim Khan did. It was shocking and appalling then, and it still is now, and now that, he thinks that he's going to be issuing these arrest warrants. But it works out, and this came out on Sunday morning, October 20th in the Daily Mail, and also in another new X account called ICC Leaks, which I'll get to in a second. So they reported that around the same time, almost exactly the same time, that Karim Khan decided that he was going to issue these arrest warrants against Israel, and by the way, maybe against some Hamas terrorists, he was told that a female employee of the ICC, his subordinate, was accusing him of sexually harassing her at an overseas trip for official business that she and he were both members of the delegation, and that he both physically and verbally sexually harassed her. So she had told this to the authorities, the relevant authorities at the ICC, and then after she submitted her allegation on May 5th, one of the members of either his office or of the office that's in charge of, checking these things out, came to him and he informed him of the allegations against him. And then I was talking to sources about this today after the initial reports came out, and they told me that actually one of the notable things about that meeting where the ICC official told Karim Khan that this woman, whose initials are SN, was accusing him of sexually harassing her, is that when he was told that allegations of sexual harassment had been made against him, he asked whether they were made by a man or a woman. And then after he was told, he said, well, is there video? So, this doesn't speak very well of the married father of two. At any rate, those were his alleged responses, according to my sources. And then once he found out about this, and it took a while, stories started coming out, or sources inside of the inside of the prosecutor's office started telling people in Israel, people in the United States, that Karim Khan suddenly has decided that he wants to ASAP issue arrest warrants against Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant. And here, one of the interesting things is that, generally speaking, the prosecutor doesn't announce his intentions, but rather the three-judge panel issues the arrest warrant. So it's not that you're telling people ahead of time that this is your intention, but rather you take your intention and you put it into a brief, which you present to the three-judge panel, and then they make a decision about whether or not to act on your brief. But here, in this case, on May 20th, Khan announced that he intended to issue these arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant, and by the way, of course, because, Hamas and all that, also against Sinwar and Hania and Death. So that was what happened in May, and the confluence of events. First the woman makes this allegation against him, and then he's told about it, and then the stories start coming to Israel that he intends to issue these arrest warrants or request the issuance of these arrest warrants from the ICC judges. So that was in May. And also in May, the same day that he announced his intention to issue these arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant, he canceled what was supposed to be a fact-finding mission to come to Israel and speak to whomever he was supposed to speak to in the Justice Ministry or wherever. And he had been telling U.S. senators who had been talking to him about this for months ahead of time that, yes, he understood that there's a problem because Israel has its own independent judiciary and its own independent prosecution, and therefore, there's no argument that the ICC has to be adjudicating this claim against Israeli leaders at all, because it should be going through the Israeli justice system and not going through the ICC, which is a court that actually doesn't have any jurisdiction against Israel because Israel isn't a member of the International Criminal Court, and we never provided them with jurisdiction over us on anything, so that they don't have a legal claim to jurisdiction. Israel has an independent judiciary and an independent state prosecution. And by the way, there's no proof whatsoever that any crime occurred, or that the crime alleged is alleged against Netanyahu and Gallant of deliberately starving Gazans ever occurred, because the Gazans get a higher than average caloric take every day. But all the same, they were making these allegations. International human rights groups were making these allegations based on no proof, based on allegations that they were receiving from Hamas and Hamas puppet groups like UNRWA, and they were relaying them to the ICC along with Hamas and Hamas's diplomatic arm, the Palestinian Authority. So it was all propaganda. This is just a pure propaganda ploy, and if there was a real problem, then Israel would be investigating it. So he had all the same, and he was supposed to come to Israel, and the assumption of the U.S. senators who had been talking with him was that he was going to have to drop the case, that he was going to come to Israel, and he would see that this is absurd, and that he doesn't have jurisdiction, and he would go away, and he would leave Israel alone. But instead, he canceled the trip, and he announced the arrest warrants the same day, and this is under the shadow of these sexual harassment allegations. And so the Daily Mail, in its story about it, it goes through and says that the woman decided that she didn't want to go forward with the allegations against him for various reasons. And then it says here, in the ICC leaks X platform. So they have here details about the matter. At the heart of the matter is a complaint. At the heart of the complaint is a female employee that they call SH, who reported to her colleagues back in April 2024 about a series of sexual harassments made by her boss, Karim Khan, who happens to be one of the most famous figures in the field of international criminal law. The acts were both of physical and psychologically abusive nature. SH has been in contact with others who have known about this kind of behavior in the past and have alerted her. So others had already told her that Karim Khan has a tendency as a penchant for sexually harassing his employees. And according to my sources, those employees come from both sexes. So she knew that he had a past, right? And she started telling her colleagues about what he had done to her in April. Okay, so it says here, it turns out that soon after her boss was personally confronted with the accusations by her work colleagues, so her colleagues were the ones who came to him, according to this, his wife contacted the people involved and tried to stop them from filing an official complaint by means of intimidation and threats. So Mrs. Khan jumped into action, according to this report, and started threatening the people who she had shared the information with and who had confronted Karim Khan and told him that these allegations were being registered against him. So it says here, the boss himself tried to use his authority to prevent the case from being reported to the IOM. The IOM is the, I think, what is it called? The Independent Office of, I don't know, Management. It's some, I'll find out. Here, Independent Oversight Mechanism. So that's the group that's supposed to actually be investigating this sexual harassment complaint against Khan. So it says here that the boss himself tried to use his authority to prevent the case from being reported to the IOM. Both attempts have failed. Senior ICC figures are now aware of the details, including the ICC president, court registrar, head of IOM, and the chief of staff. Continues on. I was also told that after losing faith in the internal process, SH recently filed a personal complaint to the ICC supervising authority. Okay, and then the other thing that they said about this matter was, here, a complaint was filed with the IOM on May 4th. I said May 5th, sorry, May 4th, 2024, but no action has been taken until today. Why is it always the case that the victim must choose between resigning and keeping her job under a person harassing her? Okay, so here's the thing, right? Why would it be? Because 16 days after she filed her complaint, he said that he was going to arrest Netanyahu. Okay, I think that that's fairly clear. The timing here is crazy because there's no reason that this should have been done on May 20th. There's no reason when he was scheduled to come to Israel, he suddenly drops all of his plans, drops the entire, investigative process. He throws all of the prosecutorial processes that people undergo, like actually investigating the allegations against the people that you're thinking about issuing arrest warrants against. He throws all of that to the seven winds. And the same day, he announces that he intends to issue these arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant. And then both at the time and since, he said, oh, the Mossad is coming after us, the Israelis are coming after us, etc. And, he says even on Saturday night, when it became public that these allegations had been launched against him, he said, this is a moment in which myself and the International Criminal Court are subject to a wide range of attacks and threats. In recent months, my family, including my wife and child, have also been targeted. And it says here, in May, the Guardian newspaper and 2 Israeli-based magazines claimed that Israel has run a 9-year war against the ICC. So here's the thing, right? Pretty sure, just guessing, right, that if Israel had known that a woman in his office was accusing him of sexual harassment, right? And especially given that this is apparently not the first time that employees claim that he has sexually harassed them, right? If Israel had known, Israel probably would have put this out, right? I mean, there's no reason for Israel to withhold this information from the public. To the contrary, Israel has every interest in sharing this information as quickly as possible with as many people in the public that it can reach. Because here's this guy who comes after the Prime Minister of Israel, comes after the State of Israel, comes after the Defense Minister of the State of Israel, right? Basically, on the heels of finding out that this woman who works for him is accusing him of sexually harassing her, both verbally and physically, right? And suddenly, poof, right? So that was in May, and now we're in October. So 5 months later, nothing's happened. no investigation, no public scrutiny, no nothing, right? And now on later this week, the 3-judge panel is supposed to rule on whether or not he is going to be allowed to go through with his get-out-of-jail-free card of going after the Jews, going after the prime minister, going after the defense minister, criminalizing the Jewish state. There's certainly a very large audience that's supportive of such actions, right? But, the question is whether this guy is going to be allowed to get away with it. Is he going to be able to get out of jail free? Literally. I mean, his brother just got out of jail, not for free, after serving half of his 18-month sentence. He was an MK in Britain, Imran Khan, and he was jailed for sexually molesting a 15-year-old. Okay, so this is like a family thing, apparently, right? So his brother's career collapses. He was a promising, I think, Tory MP. He was going places, but then boop, he had to sexually molest a child, and that kind of, if you get caught, which God willing you do, that's supposed to ruin your career. And now it works out that this guy who has aspirations to be, I don't know, UN Secretary General or whatever, now it works out that he may be going the same way as his brother has, which is down the drain pipe because he's a sexual predator. All right, so that's what's going on, and here what we're seeing is this confluence, this timing, this crazy timing, right? That you can't disregard, apropos of absolutely nothing, with no investigation, with no jurisdiction, and with no probable, and with no reason, no evidence, no jurisdiction. You're supposed to be coming to Israel in order to make out a fake investigation at least, and you're talking to U.S. senators saying they don't have any reason to worry that you're about to go after Israel, right? So it's possible, that Tony Blinken, George Clooney, his wife, all kinds of people were pressing him, wanted him to go after Israel because that's how this administration flies. That's what they want to do. They want to criminalize Israel. More than that in a second. But, why would he do it? Why would he go forward with this perversion of justice? And the answer is very likely SN. And what she has to say about what he did to her. So let's put that out there. I think it's very important for everybody to be aware of this story. And now the second thing that I was talking about, of course, is Kamala Harris accusing Israel of genocide. Here, I just want to play this clip where she did that here to you.
What about genocide? Billions of dollars.
So
2,000 people dead. 19,000 children are dead. You better call them. 19,000 children are dead. You won't call them genocide. Love you.
So, listen, what he's talking about, it's real. And so that's not the subject that I came to discuss today, but it's real, and I respect his voice.
So this clip took place, this clip was filmed over the weekend at University of Wisconsin. There apparently were large pro-Hamas demonstrations outside of the hall that she was at, talking about, domestic policy issues of one type or another. And then this pro-Hamas guy got in and made this unhinged allegation that even Hamas doesn't make, which said Israel has killed 19,000 children, right? I guess, we've killed around 19,000 terrorists, but maybe for him, Yahya Sinwar's child. I don't know. Anyway, so he makes this allegation, and she says to him, or she says after he is escorted out the door, she said, it's real, right? So this obviously isn't the first time that Kamala Harris has stated, that she sides with, sympathizes with, respects pro-Hamas protesters who want Israel annihilated and believe that Israel has no right to exist. This is something that she's done repeatedly, right? But this is the first time that she or any other American official has given credence to the utterly baseless anti-Semitic claim that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. This is the only time it's ever happened. It's never happened before. And here is Kamala Harris making this allegation. She's saying, yes, she's crediting this baseless, bigoted slander of Israel. And why? I mean, if you compare that turnout at University of Wisconsin to, turnout in anywhere that Trump appears, I mean, there's almost nobody there. Who was she talking to? Why was it so important for her to generate the support of, 15 people? And to do that, to achieve that goal, accuse Israel of committing genocide. I mean, even the scale of the event was so tiny in comparison to the implications, the massive implications of what the Vice President of the United States just accused the Jewish state of doing. It's like she has no judgment. First of all, she has no political judgment. She has no moral judgment. And she clearly prefers Hamas supporters to Israel. I don't know if she prefers Hamas, but she certainly prefers its supporters to Israel, and she doesn't value Israel supporters at all because she thinks, the Jews are going to, they'll vote Democrat no matter what she says, or they won't. But she doesn't care. The only people whose position and ideas and convictions she cares about are the ones that she apparently feels most comfortable with, which are these radical anti-Semitic Hamas supporters. And that's why she keeps praising them. I don't remember ever hearing her praise pro-Israel advocates or, activists or Jewish students on campuses who are standing up for their own civil rights by saying, how dare you tell us that we have to be silent because we're Zionists. So she's never done that, but we have video after video of her talking about how much she respects and values and loves the voices of these pro-Hamas, anti-Semitic demonstrators on U.S. college campuses. And here she is praising one of them, saying it's real. He's real. His views, they're real. They're true. To me, it's shocking. And by the way, I want to play you another clip of her. Look at what Kamala Harris said about Israel's elimination of Yahya Sinwar over the first Sukkot holiday last week. Just watch this incredible clip.
Today, Israel confirmed that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, is dead, and justice has been served. And the United States, Israel, and the entire world are better off as a result. Sinwar was responsible for the killing of thousands of innocent people, including the victims of October 7 and hostages killed in Gaza. He had American blood on his hands. Today, I can only hope that the families of the victims of Hamas feel a sense and measure of relief. Sinwar was the mastermind of October 7, the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. A terrorist attack that killed 1,200 innocent people and included horrific sexual violence and more than 250 hostages taken into Gaza, including 7 Americans, living and deceased, who remain in captivity. A terrorist attack that triggered a devastating war in Gaza, a war that has led to unconscionable suffering of many innocent Palestinians and greater instability throughout the Middle East. In the past year, American special operations and intelligence personnel have worked closely with their Israeli counterparts to locate and track Sinwar and other Hamas leaders. And I commend their work. And I will say, to any terrorist who kills Americans, threatens the American people, or threatens our troops or our interests, know this: we will always bring you to justice. Israel has a right to defend itself, and the threat Hamas poses to Israel must be eliminated. Today, there is clear progress toward that goal. Hamas is decimated, and its leadership is eliminated. This moment gives us an opportunity to finally end the war in Gaza. And it must end such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination. And it is time for the day after to begin without Hamas in power. We will not give up on these goals, and I will always work to create a future of peace, dignity, and security for all. I thank you all.
She's saying, right, that the Americans are responsible for it because you have intel support for Israel and Delta forces there. No, what are you talking about? The United States has not been giving Israel the intelligence that we need in order to go after Hamas leaders. First of all, that's intelligence that Israel has been able to garner on the ground in Gaza and from its signals intelligence, etc. But she's not the one, and Delta Force is not the reason that Israel is able to eliminate any of these terrorists. It's not at all the reason. And in the case specifically of Sinwar, he was killed by regular ground forces. Right, the unit was a unit of cadets in squad. I think it's squad is a sergeant's course, so that they're supposed to lead, the smallest organic unit inside of platoons in the Israeli army. So you get about 15, 20 soldiers who are going to be under you. So they're in a training course to be squad commanders as sergeants, right, for various infantry brigades, and they're sent as part of their training to go to war. And so they're in Gaza, and they see these terrorists skirting between buildings and trying to evade IDF forces, and so they shoot at them, and they shoot a tank shell into the building that Sinwar went to, and they got the other two as well who went into another building, and he's hiding on the second floor. They sent in a drone to find where he was, and they killed him. They didn't have any idea it was Yahya Sinwar. They just knew it was 3 terrorists who were trying to evade arrest by the IDF. So they killed him. And then only afterwards did they discover that it was Sinwar and 2 senior terrorists, and they were killed where? In Rafa, right? So Kamala Harris, and by the way, Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, also took credit for his killing by regular forces who were, just there and killed him, not knowing that it was Yahya Sinwar. But I think a lot of people have talked about it, but she threatened Israel with sanctions if we went into Gaza, if we went into Rafa. So here I just want to play you that clip of what she said.
We have been clear in multiple conversations and in every way that any major military operation in Rafa would be a huge mistake. Let me tell you something. I have studied the maps. There's nowhere for those folks to go. And we're looking at about 1.5 million people in Rafa who are there because they were told to go there, most of them. And so we've been very clear that it would be a mistake to move into Rafa with any type of military operation.
A mistake, but would there be consequences if he does move forward?
Well, we're going to take it one step at a time, but we've been very clear in terms of our perspective on whether or not that should happen.
So Kamala Harris, like Joe Biden, who also threatened Israel with sanctions, and, this was back in March, April, going into May, right, when Israel finally took action in Rafah. So they're threatening Israel with sanctions, with embargoes on weapons. And by the way, we have been embargoed since we went into Rafah of the 2,000-pound JDAMs by the Biden administration, which Kamala Harris, of course, has repeatedly said she wholeheartedly supports. We have been punished for going into Rafah by the administration along the lines that she set out or telegraphed in this interview that she gave. So she totally opposed, like every senior administration official did, Israel's plan to go into Rafah. Right? Oh, absolutely not. We don't think they need to do that at all. Jake Sullivan said in a press statement, a public statement, I think on March 24th, we've given Israel other suggestions of what they can do. I'm sure that if they involved special forces operations, right, or whatever. But we don't think that they need to go into Rafah. Well, we don't want them to go into Rafah. we think that they mustn't go into Rafa. We will punish them if they go into Rafa. We will embargo we will embargo arms supplies to Israel if they go into Rafa. And lo and behold, the JDAMs have been basically on hold since May. And because we went into Rafa. And Israel's entire war strategy, and in fact, it's really Netanyahu's war fighting strategy, was totally vindicated by the Sinwar elimination. Because Sinwar, the fact that it was regular infantry forces on the ground who killed, together with tank forces on the ground, that killed him, right? In a shooting, in an elimination that was unplanned and not based on any intelligence information, shows how critical it is for Israel to control Rafah and to have its boots on the ground and not be operating through some, signals intelligence and sensors and intelligence sharing with Egypt, which of course hid everything that Hamas was doing from Israel for years and enabled it to happen with these cross-border tunnels that Israel found along the Egyptian Gazan border after Israel took over Rafah, right? So we're supposed to get intelligence from Egypt, which is a lie. We're supposed to use these sensors, which never work. We're supposed to use special forces and expose them to massive danger, right, in order to go into tunnels where Yahya Sinwar may or may not be located to go after him, et cetera, but anything not to put your boots on the ground in Rafah, right? And so Israel's refusal to buckle to American pressure and actually go into Rafah despite everything was totally vindicated. In Robert Woodward's new book, right, A War, something about the world at war under the brilliant leadership of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, he gives this excerpt of a phone conversation that Biden had with Prime Minister Netanyahu, where Biden says, "Come on, man, you don't have a strategy," and Netanyahu said, "I'm going to go into Rafah," and Joe Biden said to him, "You don't have a strategy." Right? So he's saying you don't have a strategy. It's not that you don't have a strategy. Say, I don't like your strategy, but that's not what he said. But Israel did have a strategy, does have a strategy. We went into Rafah. We took over the international border, which caused massive problems for Hamas because they can't resupply and their terrorists can't leave. And Yahya Sinwar was holding 40,000 shekels, it's around, $12,000 in cash on hand when he was killed. He also was carrying the ID card of an UNRWA humanitarian personnel, a teacher or whatever, which again shows that the UN, UNRWA, their Palestinian relief work agency, is just an adjunct of Hamas. It's all the same, and they use it in order to get into the humanitarian safe zones, to get across the border, maybe with Egypt, etc. So he's carrying these false IDs. And so everything was validated. Israel's accusations that UNRWA is a terrorist organization, Israel's determination to take over Rafah, to have forces on the ground in Rafah, everything that Israel fought to do that went against all of the dictates that we received from Kamala Harris, who's now accusing us of genocide, and all of her colleagues in the Biden-Harris administration, everything has been vindicated. The entire thing. Through this Sinwar raid, which now was just the utmost chutzpah, like you can't even believe it, right? She is claiming credit for. She's saying it's because of U.S. intelligence. And then she turns around and says that Israel is committing genocide, or agrees with this pro-Hamas student who accuses Israel of genocide. She doesn't stand up to them ever. There's no sister soldier moment for Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. There never has been. At every point where they're supposed to be making a decision between telling the truth and pandering to the radical anti-Semitic, anti-American left, they've always chosen to pander. Always. They've never stood up to anybody for the truth, whether it's in relation to the goodness of the United States or it's in relation to the basic morality of the state of Israel. Nothing. They never stand up to them, not once. And here she did it again. And again, this is a sign of things to come. If she's doing this to a crowd of, 5.5 people at the University of Wisconsin, what's she going to do when she's president? And these people are all working for her. And this brings us to the last thing that I wanted to talk about, which was the apparent leaks of crazy top secret information about how Israel is training to attack Iran. right? So on Saturday, there's this Telegram group. It's called the Middle East Spectator Telegram page. Okay, and certain news agencies have said that this Middle East Spectator Telegram page is aligned with, tied to the Iranian regime, which may or may not be true. They claim it's not true, but whatever. So they put out these U.S. intelligence documents, you can just see them here, that show that, or that claim that satellite imagery over Israeli Air Force bases has shown that a large number of Israeli Air Force aircraft are training to attack Iran with air-launched ballistic missiles, with F-15Is, and they're doing all kinds of things to sort of hide what they're doing, to harden the bases themselves, to scatter the aircraft to protect them from counterattack, etc. And so they're giving all of this information. They even said that they don't have any indication that Israel is planning a tactical nuclear strike against Iran, exposing like some sort of an open dialogue or open discourse within the American intelligence community that's shared apparently with the Five Eyes community, which is the United States, Britain, Australia, and two others that I can't remember, whatever, states that are all sharing this intelligence with one another. And so they apparently have an open discourse about Israel's alleged nuclear arsenal, and they put it out. And then this Telegram page, which is apparently aligned with the Iranian regime, or allegedly aligned with the Iranian regime, they put out these statements, and so, or these highly classified documents. So, a couple of things on this. The first one is that the Americans keep demanding that Israel tell them what we're planning on doing in Iran. And, well, apparently now we know why. Because, in 2012, the United States leaked Israel's plans to attack Iran's nuclear installations. Before that, they leaked the Stuxnet spyware worm against Iran, which really launched us on this massive Cold War escalation in cyber warfare, because the United States just told Iran that Israel was engaging in it. So then the Iranians started engaging in it, and so on and so forth. So we've gotten to this escalatory arms race, basically, in cyber warfare, because of the Obama administration leaks of Israel, and in this case, in the case of the Stuxnet, a joint U.S.-Israel cyber weapon that was being utilized against Iran's centrifuge plants. And so here you have repeated leaks by the United States, by the Biden administration and by the Obama administration, of Israel's efforts to scuttle Iran's quest for nuclear weapons, of Israel's plans to attack Iran's nuclear or other sites. So they have a track record here that's quite long and storied and devastating. And here we have this latest story. So obviously the takeaway is that Israel should give them as little information as possible, which was why Israel was correct not to give the United States information about the walkie-talkie operation or the Chassan Nasrallah operation until those operations were actually being carried out. And even then, Israel reportedly only shared a limited amount of information with the Biden administration in order to prevent them from telling Iran what was going on. And now we have this leak. And so the second thing that I wanted to say about this leak is Ariane Tabatabai. Right? Ariane Tabatabai is the chief of staff of the Assistant Defense Secretary for Low-Intensity Conflict and Special Operations. She's also a naval intelligence officer. We've talked about her at length back in the summer of 2023. I think it was actually early September of 2023. You had the issuance of a joint investigative report by Semaphore and Iran International that figured Ariane Tabatabai as a woman who in the past had been an agent of the Iranian regime. She had spoken to handlers in the foreign ministry and the Revolutionary Guards, asking them whether they thought that she should participate in a professional trip to Saudi Arabia and Israel. And she was given the response, well, you should go to Saudi, but we think you should stay away from Israel, right? And so she was brought in first to the negotiations with the Iranians at the beginning of the Biden administration by Robert Malley, who was the special envoy for nuclear negotiations with Iran until earlier this year, I think it was. He was removed from his position with nobody being informed of it, or he had his security clearance revoked because they discovered that he was mishandling classified information. And neither the State Department nor the FBI have provided any information about the classified information that he was mishandling, who he was sharing it with, under what circumstances it was done. They haven't given any information about the status of the FBI probe against him, including if it's a criminal probe. The Inspector General's report, which was devastating about Malley, they discovered that initially he wasn't even informed that his clearance was revoked. So he continued to carry out official business as the envoy to these conversations with Iran, continuing to carry out these talks with the Iranians based on classified information that he received without being told that he didn't have classified access any longer. And obviously the Congress was not informed, but also his counterparts at the White House weren't informed. Nobody was informed that his clearance had been removed because he was mishandling classified information. And still today, we don't know what it was that he was mishandling, but both he and associates of his at the International Crisis Group, including Tabatabai and others, were part of this Iran experts group, which worked directly with the Iranian regime to facilitate their influence in the United States. And then Robert Malley brought Tabatabai and others into the Biden administration with him. She left the Iranian negotiations and moved over to the Pentagon. And when these allegations surfaced against her, and it was a huge deal in the U.S. media, not only was her security clearance not revoked, claiming that she had carried out these conversations with Iranian government officials 7 years earlier, and therefore they weren't included in what she was supposed to be reporting about her ties with the Iranian regime during the course of her security clearance investigation. So therefore she didn't do anything wrong by not telling them that she was working as a regime agent, right? They actually upgraded her intelligence, her classified, her security clearance. After the information came out, she got an expanded security clearance because she passed naval intelligence reserve officer training. So now she apparently has access not only to all low-intensity conflict information as chief of staff to the assistant secretary, but also all U.S. special operations of U.S. partners, aka Israel, and also all naval operations in the world, basically, because it's the Defense Department, but including in the Red Sea, in the Indian Ocean, in the Mediterranean, etc. So, in the classified documents that were published over the weekend, it also has information about Israeli naval operations. So, ahead of a strike against Iran. So this is like shocking. But and then there's this report from Red State that people inside of the Pentagon say that the source of the leak was in fact her office, which would be a real, shocker, pocker not. And another person who's implicated in this whole Iranian influence operation is known other than Kamala Harris's national security advisor. So, you have this situation where Phil Gordon, so you have the situation where, people who are in senior level positions or mid-level positions in the Biden administration, have untoward ties and historically with the Iranian regime, and they're not punished for it. They're promoted because of it, right? Or they're shielded from prosecution because of it, like Robert Malley. I mean, he's working now as a professor at Yale because, whatever. And the funny thing about Robert Malley and Kamala Harris and Tabatabai and all of these others, Phil Gordon, is that Samantha Powers, is that, it shows really the trajectory of Democratic foreign policy thinking since Obama. So during the 2008 elections, Robert Malley and Samantha Power were both named foreign policy advisors to Obama. And Robert Malley was forced to leave the Obama campaign, or Obama was forced to push him out because it was reported, it was exposed that Malley was carrying out illicit contacts with Hezbollah terrorists and Hamas terrorists, right? Which is illegal and under American law. But more than that, I mean, what kind of foreign policy is this guy planning to put together that his senior advisors are talking to terrorists in order to advance whatever policies he wants? So what was, he doesn't represent me, he's out. Everybody knew that Malley was a radical because he came out of the closet after the failed Camp David peace summit in 2000, where the PLO rejected Palestinian statehood that was offered to them by the Ehud Barak government in Israel in July 2000, and subsequent, even more radical Israeli offers of Palestinian statehood that came afterwards, and instead opened up a massive terror war against Israel 2 months later, or a month and a half later, on the 28th of September. So you had Robert Malley authoring an article, I think in the New York Times, it might have been in the New York Review of Books, where he placed all of the blame for the collapse of the peace process not on Yasser Arafat, who rejected peace and opted for jihad and started, massacring Israeli citizens with suicide bombers shortly thereafter, but that it was all Israel's fault. Israel's fault because we were acting like colonialists or something, and it was pure garbage. I mean, there was totally stupid, his claims against Israel, and it was embraced. He was embraced by the anti-Semitic left that was already becoming extremely radicalized and active and dangerous back in late 2000 when they started their first, calls to boycott Israel and assaults on Jewish students at places like San Francisco State University and University of Michigan and other places as early as 2000. So, it was he that was lighting a match or giving them cause to feel justified in standing with Palestinian terrorists against their Jewish victims as far back as 2000, because he came out with this New York Times article. And then, 2008, he's meeting with terrorists and he's pushed out of the administration. Same thing, Samantha Power, she was pushed out, not because she was a radical, although she was, but because she said nasty things about Hillary Clinton. But what he did was, after these two were pushed out, he brought them both in again. He brought them both in again to National Security Council positions where they didn't have to, be approved by the Senate. And it was his own personal power. Nobody can question the president's appointments at the National Security Council level because it's White House. So he brings them in to senior positions in the White House. In his second term, Samantha Power was forgiven of all wrongdoing, and she became the UN ambassador, where she proceeded with this massive wiretap operation that was later exposed in 2015 against Israelis and American Jews who were opposed to the Iran nuclear deal. That was sort of the precursor for their eavesdropping on Trump and his advisors after the 2016 and during the 2016 election. But all the same, that was spearheaded by Samantha Power, who was pushed out, and Robert Malley, who was one of the top negotiators with the Iranians, and in 2014 and 2015. So they were koshered, basically, by Obama in these appointed positions. And then, when Biden came in, by the time that Biden came in 2017, these positions that had been so radical in 2000 and 2008 had suddenly become the mainstream positions of the entire Democratic Party, of the entire Democratic foreign policy establishment. And so you had a situation where you had these anti-American, anti-Jewish radicals like Robert Malley, who were then placed in positions to be really the architects of Joe Biden's Iran policy and his Israel policy. And Samantha Power, not surprisingly, was one of the first people to start resonating these claims that Israel was committing war crimes in Gaza when, as administrator of USAID, she ignored all of the proof that has just piled up showing that Hamas is stealing all of the humanitarian aid and deliberately trying to starve the Gazans to blame Israel for its own crimes, and then saying that Israel has to do more to give food to Gaza, and that we were threatening them, with starvation or whatever, which were then Those are the allegations that Khan picked up after he was accused of sexual harassment. And so it was the Biden administration, it was these radicals who were not able to be on Obama's 2008 campaign because of the radicalism that were then brought in. And since then, they've been pushing these pro-Hamas, anti-Israel, anti-Jewish policies that now have become so accepted inside of the administration with these Iranian regime agents inside of the administration itself, that Kamala Harris probably forgot that it was wrong, that she wasn't supposed to accuse Israel of genocide. It only, it like you start wondering why, what are they saying? Or you start understanding the kind of coin of the realm inside of the State Department, how they speak, what is the parlance going on there in the National Security Council, how is Israel referred to in those areas, in those places, and then you get back to the leaks and you say, well, it could have been Tabatabai, it could be that Red State report is correct, or it could be that they're not correct. It could be that it was a junior level staffer in the Pentagon or at the State Department or at the CIA or at the DIA or at the National Security Agency or where have you, that they are all radical, rabid Israel haters, and they want to, and who love Iran. And that's why they were hired, because they have all the right politics, and maybe they have lots of different races or sexual proclivities or preferences or whatever. And therefore that made them DEI hires and equity and anti-Semitic hires or whatever, so that they were brought into even junior level positions. And they see this and they say, oh, let's leak it. I mean, we've had several examples of that kind of operation being chosen by these junior staffers who hate Jews, who hate Israel, and who are there and were hired because they hate Jews and they hate Israel. So, there are a lot of different culprits, possible culprits in this intelligence leak, but obviously the take-home has to be that Israel simply can't be sharing any of this information with the Biden administration. I mean, there's nothing you can do to hide Air Force sorties from American satellite imagery. But, to the extent that it's within Israel's control not to share information with the United States, it would seem like it would be the wise thing to do. And, when you look, you see all over the place, right? Israel being validated, Israel's war-fighting strategy, its prime minister, its ability to change reality on the ground, its ability to defeat terrorists, all of this is being proven. And again, its concept for fighting this war has been validated over and over and over again. Prime Minister Netanyahu's positions on all of these issues that have been so challenged and so threatened by the United States, and of course the Israeli left, which has just completely gone off the rails since we started winning. And you see that on the other hand, as all of this is transpiring, the administration is doubling down. So they were mad at us for killing Nasrallah. They're bummed, apparently, that we got Sinwar, that they'll take credit for it. I mean, all they want to do is get to a ceasefire. Their position hasn't changed one iota since Israel started proving that we're winning and that we can win. And that, by the way, they could do this too if they wanted to, right? It is possible to defeat terrorism. It's possible to lay waste to Iran's entire, ring of fire, as they called it, that they surrounded Israel with. And by the way, U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria and Jordan as well. The United States could defeat them if they wanted to. Unfortunately, the reason why Joe Biden told Bibi that he has no strategy wasn't because the Prime Minister of Israel has no strategy, because it's not the right strategy. The strategy, as far as the administration is concerned, is one, twofold, but one, it's always the same 2 points, right? Facilitate Iran's efforts to achieve a nuclear arsenal and demand that Israel enable the establishment of a Palestinian state, not only in Gaza, but in Judea and Samaria. And by the way, here, I just want to show you this picture. Okay, what is this? What are we looking at here? Oh, well, that's Mahmoud Abbas at the end, the head of the head of the Palestinian Authority, and all around the table, sitting next to him or standing next to him with their heads bowed, are all of the senior members of the Palestinian Authority, all bowing their heads in memory of Yahya Sinwar. Okay? And these are the fake moderates that the administration insists we should make a state for, not only in Gaza, but in Judea and Samaria and in Jerusalem, to render Israel entirely indefensible and place it in imminent jeopardy of annihilation, right? So to gain these two policies, to achieve these two policies, empowering Iran and establishing a Palestinian state, both of which are existential threats to Israel, right? You have, right? Who am I imitating? No, just kidding. But the United States is bearing down on Israel, threatening us, and borrowing certain types of weapons that we need in order to win, right? Leaking our preparations to attack Iran, and accusing us of genocide, and all this while what? We have this fake, we have this alleged sexual predator who harassed, allegedly, a female employee and found out that he was being accused of sexually harassing her, immediately turning around and saying, okay, how do I get out of this? I blame the Jew. I blame the Jew everybody hates. Who's the Jew that everybody hates? Baby, you have no strategy, Netanyahu. That Jew. So he goes after Prime Minister Netanyahu, and 5 months, nothing has been done with this woman's complaint against him. Nothing. Nothing at all. That's how it's done in the world we live in. And that's all I have to say right now, except for one more thing. Doesn't matter. It's not going to help them. We're winning. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I'll talk to you guys later. Take care. Bye-bye.